So in my last video I showed you how I sketched these 4 landscapes here, and if you want to see that before seeing this next part, then you should probably click the link down there in the description first so you can see what I did there. If you're coming from that video, hello there. Let's not muck about, let's just get into it. Here are the quick colour setups that I've added to these 4 sketches, and I'm going to go over the tools that I've used to do this in this video. I've tried to not speed this video up so much, and hopefully this time I'm not as close to the microphone as I was in my last one, because I was a little bit like, ooh, a little bit too close. So yeah, but anyway, I haven't tried to speed this up too much, and even though it is still 40 minutes long, hopefully that's mostly because it's closer to my actual painting speed. I think as you'll watch this, you'll realise that this way of adding colour to a black and white image is really a process of fine-tuning. You'll see me tweaking what I have a lot slowly back and forth, trying to find what works based on a general idea I've got from the reference that I'm looking at and the kind of colour scheme that I'm trying to get to. I'm not going to ramble as much in this video, and I'm just going to get on with it, even though I've already been rambling quite a bit already. Hopefully from my previous video you can see what I'm doing with selecting parts of the image using the color range tool and you know, the magic wand and things like that. So if you're confused about what I'm doing with that, I do recommend you go and watch my previous video so you can get more of a heads up on all that stuff if you're confused about it. Overall in this video you'll see me mostly using layer blending modes and adjustment layers, all tweaked with opacity controls. I'll also be painting a lot too, as this isn't just about adding a wash of colour over your black and white sketches. I'll be using a similar workflow to my last video, where I'll be selecting these areas of value that I've already set out and then adding colour into them in various ways. I've attached a layer to the base sketch using a clipping mask, and a clipping mask is a layer that can be used on top of another layer to paint into the boundaries of said layer. It's a good way of not ruining your work but also keeping things within a certain layer. I explain clipping masks in my landscape tutorial video, and yes, again, feel free to check that out. But here's a quick overview anyway though. Make a new layer above a previous layer, and right click the top layer and then choose create clipping mask. One of the main things that I'll really be using throughout this process are layer blending modes, and I'm using them straight away here. You can see them over on the right layer palette at the top of the layer palette. Back to blending modes for a little bit though. To really get that punchy and glowy look that I tend to rely on quite a lot in my paintings, we'll be using the contrast heavy blending modes, and these are the ones like overlay, soft light and hard light. And I know I said I wasn't going to ramble, but apparently here I am doing that exact thing. So a bit of a side note to that, Photoshop's layer blending modes can be a really confusing set of things to get your head around. There are a ton of mathematical equations that are behind each mode, meaning that each of them can have a really varying effect on your paintings. I don't really think it's necessary to sit down and religiously learn all the little intricate details behind these modes. I think you kind of have to have an idea about, you know, a general idea of what they do to paintings, but like, as I said, the mathematical background to all these is to me really confusing, and I'm just a bit stupid, so I find it best just to experiment and to see what each of these layer blending modes does when you apply them to your painting. Obviously you have to have a general idea about what you are doing with these, and I will get on to more of that in a bit. But if you're like me, you probably learn in a more visual way, and the more you play with things like this, the more you'll understand what each of them does. For a quick breakdown, modes like overlay and soft lights are generally known as the contrast layers. These essentially help you make your images pop a bit more by increasing the contrast in the areas that you're painting. Overlay was one of those layer modes that I used to use all the time when I was starting out, because it would make this overblown look to things. And it wasn't exactly a good look, but it was still really cool to play with at least, and I felt like it had added this kind of I can't really explain it, this level of glow or intensity, something like that. I mean, look at these old things I did here. I used overlay far too much, and because of that there's so much white space and loads of really dark blacks everywhere. When you increase the contrast so much, you lose so much detail and, dare I say it, nuance. Obviously these modes need to be used carefully and sparingly, because if not you'll ruin the values of the base sketch and you'll end up like me 10 years ago, and you don't want to be like that. When you use overlay effectively with a soft brush and strong colour, you'll find it'll start to make this really nice glowy and boosting effect to your work, and you'll be pushing the eye more towards a point in the painting. That's why when I do use it, I mostly use it around areas where the focal point is going to be, just to give it that little extra bit of pop. But obviously again I use this very sparingly. Well, now I do anyway. So unfortunately there isn't one big secret to turning your black and white sketches into colour ones. Using things like blending modes, etc. will help you create more vibrant pieces, but without proper direction these are going to be pretty useless. And if you've watched my videos up to now, you probably know what I'm getting at and where I'm going with this. The way that you'll effectively be able to make pleasing colour schemes is to research them first. This means that you should be looking at reference, and this can be anything. When I say reference, I mean things like colour grading in movies, artwork made by other artists, real life and photos from real life and things like that. Finding colour schemes and setups in other media is the first step to learning how to apply colour to your own work. Putting down random colours without really thinking about why usually won't lead to a successful painting, so you should have an idea for a colour scheme planned out first. These first two sketches, for example, I was looking at places like Monument Valley in the USA, as well as a number of other cool pieces of artwork that I've seen on ArtStation. I've tried to build up a visual library in my head of how I want the scene to be coloured by researching how the area actually looks in certain lighting setups, while also seeing how other artists have utilised colour in their own work as well. A lot of the time I'll be really inspired by a really bright and bold sketch that I've seen somewhere, like on Instagram or something like that, and I'll want to then go and paint something really similar to that in my own style, referencing the cool colours they've used or the kind of like nice style that they're going for. Or I'll save it in my references folder for something else down the line. What I mean is you should normalise collecting and researching cool images that inspire you to make similar things and then draw from them. So I did touch on this a little bit at the beginning, but hopefully you didn't come into this video thinking that when you colour in a black and white image like this, that you'll just be adding in really easy washes of colour and, you know, adjustment layers and all that kind of stuff. Because unfortunately in this workflow anyway, there is still a lot of painting to be done. You can see that I'm selecting areas and then using specific colours on them, things like blue in the shadows, warm oranges and yellows in the light, and I'm still using my brush tool to paint into the scene. I'm using relatively broad strokes of colour, but at the same time I'm trying not to just wash one colour over an entire area in a soft brush and call it done. You can leave the big soft brush strokes until the end when we're adding in atmosphere and lighting changes and stuff like that. I'm trying to add in vibrancy to a dull black and white image, and I want it to look colourful and unlike the base sketch as much as possible. By using things like brush pressure, opacity, that's hard to say, and colour dynamics in my brush settings, I'm trying to vary the vibrancy of the colour that I'm putting down. You've got to think about each element in your painting as its own object, and think about how that one object is being lit. And this comes again from researching your subject matter. When you do good research, you'll be able to see what kind of colours will work well, and it's not about using the exact right ones. Again, this is meant to be fun and experimental. It's about using colours that work well together to create a pleasing colour scheme. There isn't an easy trick to it, unfortunately, but thankfully, as we've already set out a base sketch, we've got something to work with. I tried in my last video to make a sketch that had simple forms and grouped value areas, essentially grouping areas of light and dark. This is to simplify the image and make it look more striking and graphic and just a bit bolder. And also it's to make the whole process easier, which I like, including the colouring part that we're doing now. We've already set out the guidelines of where to put the colour, we just now need to do that and put it down. We're trying to continue with the simplified nature of the base sketch and put down sketchy blocks of colour, trying to retain that graphic look that we're going for. An important way to think about these sketches is to think about them as a whole, instead of just focusing on one area and working out from there. I'm trying to keep as zoomed out as I can so I can see the entire sketch. I started with an overall colour shift at the start of the video, but then I moved on to creating the blocks of colour that you can now see here. As you start building these blocks of colour up, helped by your base sketch underneath, we'll start to see the piece coming together as a whole, and you'll start to see how these strong colours might be affecting the overall colour composition and value. Our colour choices should be in line with the sketch and the reference that we've gathered. I'm making sure that my focal point, the lit area of that main rock, is lit in a bright and warm yellow, which then complements the colder surroundings that are in shadow. What I mean by that, and what I'm trying to get onto now, is that I'm trying to create mood and atmosphere. Another quick side note though, I seem to be doing quite a lot of them. You can see here that I'm using overlay and soft light blending modes to give that warm glow. I'm trying to replicate the sun bouncing off of the rock. I'm using warm oranges and reds to do this, and I'm only doing this now as it's towards the end of my process with this sketch, and I don't want to now go back and paint over that nice glow effect that I've got going on. I've also used the linear dodge in brackets add blending mode too, with a really bold red here, and I've done this to get those reds burning into the shadows. I'm trying to hint at the idea of the sunlight bouncing and reflecting into those shadows. I feel like this is a really good thing to remember to do to add vibrancy, as long as it makes sense. So mood and atmosphere in paintings is a very subjective thing, and I'm not referring to atmospheric perspective here either. The way I'm trying to choose my colour and lighting, and the way I've already set up my sketches previously, is to try and portray a certain mood. Certain colour schemes and subject matter in lighting setups and compositions will lead a painting to have a very particular mood, and this is something you can see everywhere in other media and in real life. Certain environments will have a feeling to them depending on what you're trying to get across. One of the easiest ways to explain what I mean is this. Imagine that there's a picture of a sunny day and a picture of an overcast day in your mind next to each other. What elements of each day portray a mood to you? As this is subjective again, we all see things a little bit differently, but to me, a picture of a sunny day would conjure up feelings of warmth and happiness and energy, and just quite nice feelings. And obviously, conversely to that, an overcast day to me would be a bit gloomy, cold, and a bit sad, a bit like England where I live. The colours you would use to portray a sunny day, yellows, reds, and the deep blue for the sky, set up an idea of the kind of mood a place like that has. This is something that we have kind of ingrained into us anyway, from movies and media and general ideas of what certain colours mean to us. For example, grey and blue colours tend to be more downbeat. They might evoke feelings of sadness or dullness. Green colours tend to symbolise nature and life. The colours that I'm using for these sketches are mostly on the warm side of the colour wheel. For the areas that are in light, I'm using yellows and oranges and warm greens. The warm greens come a little bit later on. These don't help to build mood alone though, and it's the offset of colours I'm using in the shadow areas that help to build an overall feel of drama and scale, and then eventually, hopefully, a nice mood to them. I'm using cooler purples and blues in the shadows to hint at the sky colour seeping into these shadows, but also to add in colour contrast to the warm focal areas. It's this offset that I'm trying to accomplish which will hopefully build the mood I want to get across. Almost moody and shadowy environments that are punctuated with strong rays of light and vibrancy, hopefully creating a feeling of grandeur and warmth in the environment. But more so than just colour, the lighting in a piece will help set the mood even more. Lighting is one of those ways that I try to use the most to create mood in my work. I usually try to go for quite shadowed environments, with one area in particular being here, like I just mentioned, trying to hint at something a bit more fantastical going on with dramatic lighting. Dramatic lighting conjures up these feelings of grandeur to me, and that's the kind of mood and atmosphere I want for these sketches. Mood and atmosphere, again, is something that's very subjective, but it's something that you can research in other media to see how you want to get across a feeling to the viewer. If I was going to create a, like a moody horror scene with zombies and all that kind of stuff, I would stick to desaturated blues and greys with a high contrast. I would use lots of dark space, or lots of dark colours, to get across a spooky and gloomy mood. Looking at examples of colour grading in movies, and like different colour palettes that different shots in movies use, is a great way to see how you can use colour and light to portray a certain mood. Creating good colour schemes and lighting goes hand in hand with creating an effective mood in your sketches. So I did say I wasn't going to ramble as much in this video, so that's where I'm going to leave it with my narration for this one, but I am working on a lot more videos now that I've got my new computer set up and I've got this lovely new microphone, so this might be a little bit short, but I am working on a lot more content, and that will hopefully come out a little bit quicker than these ones have. I'll let the video play out now, and as I said, I've made sure to not speed this up as I usually have, so hopefully this will be a bit more clearer than some of my older videos have been. So yeah, the main thing really is to make sure to remember to be looking at ref, not just when you're adding colour to a black and white image like this, like all the time. Hopefully there is something in the rest of this process video that you can find useful, and I will see you next time.